The Radio Forest Podcast.
Hey, Forrest, this is John from the Fab Four.
Hey, John, what's happening? John Lennon.
How's it going?
Good, doing really well. You guys are coming to Boise Egyptian Theater. Friday, October 25th, it's USA Meets the Beatles. So what is that? Is that like the first introduction when the Beatles first came to the States, or what kind of show is this?
So the name America Meets the Beatles, that first record that came out in the United States, well, it wasn't the first one, it was actually the second record that the Beatles put out, was called Meet the Beatles. And yeah, for all those Beatles fans out there, you probably know that the UK had different albums than the United States did. So in the UK, the first album was Please Please Me, and then the second album was With the Beatles. So for the US version, I think it was the Capitol Records version, if I'm not mistaken, it was called Meet the Beatles, and it was sort of like the American version of With the Beatles. And it had a different track list. It had a lot of the singles that had come out, like I Want to Hold Your Hand and She Loves You, are on the Meet the Beatles album, unlike the UK version, which had a different track listing. But this is all, kind of like splitting hairs and stuff. All in all, Meet the Beatles was the first record really that the United States saw of the Beatles. It was technically the second, but it's a lot of people's remember it as the first. We're going to do a lot of songs from that. We're going to do a lot of songs from like the Ed Sullivan Show. So just a big celebration of when the Beatles first came to the U.S.
I've seen sometimes you guys have like an Ed Sullivan guy on stage with you. Is that happening here in Boise?
Yeah, we do. It's so great. It adds such a great flair to the show because any Beatles fan, you've seen them on the Ed Sullivan Show a million times, and we could probably all recite that introduction that Ed gives at the beginning verbatim. So yeah, Ed is definitely a big part of the show. It's a lot of fun.
Also seeing that you've done quite a few performances prior to being with the Fab Four, and I read that you were on stage with Cheap Trick, REO Speedwagon, and Smash Mouth. What capacity was that in? Was it the opening with or performing with?
Yeah, it was opening, and believe it or not, it was with a different Beatles tribute band. So many great opportunities. So many people love the Beatles that I feel like we're invited and people are excited to see us wherever we go playing Beatles music. That's the great thing about the Beatles. Playing Beatles music for so long, I've had a lot of great opportunities that, to be honest, I didn't expect when I got into the Beatles business, I guess you could say. But yeah, some of the greatest musical experiences of my life have been playing Beatles music. When I opened for Cheap Trick, this was in Detroit, probably a few years ago, a handful of years ago. And yeah, when we finished our sound check, the lead singer and the guitarist,
Rick Nielsen,
came into the trailer. Yeah, Rick Nielsen, and they were just total Beatles fans, and they were gushing over our sound check, and so they love the Beatles, and we talked about the Beatles for a while, and they told us about they had just filmed a live concert in Vegas. I think they were playing the Sgt. Pepper album in its completion, so they were talking to us about that, but yeah, everyone is a Beatles fan everywhere you go. It's super fun.
Yeah, I'd be more nervous playing the Beatles in front of Cheap Trick than I would a crowd because the crowd's like, "Oh, this is great." Cheap Trick might actually know a couple of the Beatles and might have a deeper history than me with the Beatles catalog. I'd be more nervous.
Luckily, they weren't visible when we were playing our show.
Oh, nice.
If they were there, if they were just sitting there watching, maybe I would have been a bit nervous. But actually, honestly, when I get on stage and I kind of click into gear, I don't really get nervous anymore.
What about Pete Best? I saw that you've performed with him as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Pete. That was also in I think in Michigan or the Detroit area. But holy cow, that was again with a different band. But I just remember I got noticed for it maybe just a week before the show, and just massive Beatles fan. I was introduced to the Beatles with the Beatles anthology. That was everything to me when I was a kid. And so the first part of that documentary, the first disc in the first anthology soundtrack, it came out with all those soundtracks. And that's Pete Best on most of that first disc, Cry for a Shadow and all those early recordings. And I loved those early recordings. There's just something about it that's just, there's just so much imagery, right? When you listen to those recordings, you can just kind of picture the dark, smoky cavern club or, Hamburg or wherever it is they were playing. So I was a big fan of those early recordings and Pete Best. And then, we got the word that Pete was going to be at a show. I think it was Sterling Heights. It was in Sterling Heights, Michigan. And, it was so great. We talked with him at sound check. I asked him questions that I kind of figured only someone in the, who was there would know. He was a really quiet guy, which I had heard. I think, unfortunately, was one of the reasons that they parted ways with him so brutally that like they did. But, it was great. I bought him a Guinness. We sat in the van next to each other after the show. We went back to the hotel and we all got drinks, and it was a great time for a Beatles fan. Holy cow. It was great. And there's video of it on YouTube too. So I know it wasn't in my imagination, but there's a video of us doing My Bonnie, sort of like just an old timey song. Yeah, but there's a great recording of it, and Pete played with us on there. It was crazy because, we all stand in the places on stage where our character stood. And so I stand in John's position, and when I turned around to look at Pete to say we're ready to count in the song, it was really surreal. It was, I was thinking to myself, wow, I'm looking at Pete Best from the same vantage point that John did when he would turn around and have him click into the song. So it was very surreal for a Beatles fan.
Yeah, you'd have the exact same experience that John Lennon did in the exact same spot. That would be a little freaky for a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
I know you've got a degree in music, and I know you've taught guitar and music for a long time. So could you talk to me a little bit about the differences in songwriting, say, between the Beatles and a David Bowie song? How do they approach songwriting? It has to be, at its core, completely different attitudes, right?
Well, man, that's a great question. I don't know that they're that different. So I can tell you that the Beatles, their school, their education was when they were playing those 9-hour shows in Hamburg, and they were hopped up on Preludin, and they were getting in their 10,000 hours. And so you playing all these cover versions of American R&B songs and just really building up that catalog. And you can see evidence of it when you watch the Get Back documentary, because, while they're changing the tape on the machines or in between songs, they're playing all of these cover versions of songs that they love so much that they played back in the day, and they just all launch into them together at the same time. So yeah, their education was playing those super long shows in Hamburg, just internalizing all of that music. Bowie, from a musical standpoint, chords, believe it or not, chord progressions kind of go in and out of style. It's not as obvious as maybe clothing, but chords do. And when you listen to early Bowie, well, let's just go to Ziggy Stardust. When you listen to Ziggy Stardust, it's very musical theater almost, particularly songs like Starman. Starman actually sounds like Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It has that big octave jump at the beginning of the chorus. So honestly, a lot of the chord progressions, musicality, I really kind of feel like they come from a similar place. Because if we think about Paul doing Till There Was You, that's very musical theater. If we think about even A Taste of Honey, those early on songs, the songwriting, I think, comes from a similar place. Now, if we get into Bowie later on, in the low period, I think those come from very different places, different inspirations. Yeah, that's a great question. I know that, John and Paul would sit together knee to knee and just write songs. And according to Paul, they never had what did he call it, a dry session. Whenever they would get together, they would always finish a song. They were always productive, I think I know more about Beatles' songwriting process than Bowie. I do know that as a songwriter myself, I heard that Bowie writes in a way that just seems really unusual to me, or he wrote in a way. He would, write all the music first, not even melodies. And so when he was recording Heroes, so this is later on, he had all the music first, and he just went in and sort of improvised lyrics, and it was the last thing. He would improvise the vocals and the lyrics, the very last part of the song. John and Paul really seem I don't know, it seems like they were just starting right off with the melody and the lyrics.
What are your thoughts on the upcoming Bob Dylan movie? We had Bob Dylan come through here not that long ago. And when I heard the announcement, I was like, man, I don't know. And then I saw the trailer and I was like, oh my God, I'm in. I'm all in.
I had the same experience as you. I was I heard, because there's so many biopics that have come out, and there's good ones and there's not so great ones. I almost feel like the bigger the subject matter, someone like Bob Dylan, like, holy cow, you've got to be really like, you got to do a good job.
You got to be exactly like him. It can't be an interpretation of him. It has to be him.
Yeah. And because everyone knows every single lyric, everyone knows so much about his life. And then I saw Timothy Chalamet, and I was like, oh, no.
Yeah, me too.
But then you're exactly right. I saw the trailer, and holy cow, he's got the vocals in. There was like a sort of a silhouette shot of him, I'm guessing, in kind of like 1965 era, you know, with sort of the bigger hair and the sunglasses. And he looked fantastic. I moved to New York for a while and sang folk music in the Village and in a previous lifetime. So I'm very excited, though.
All right, so if you're a big Bob Dylan fan, I was hoping you could help me rank 5 harmonica players: Steven Tyler, Robert Plant, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, John Lennon.
Well, Bob Dylan, I think as far as, well, what are we talking about? Are we talking about virtuosity? Are we talking about expressiveness? Because Bob Dylan...
I'd say emotion. I'd say who can do the best emotion, who can pull the song to another place with the harmonica.
You're going to get a long answer out of me, dude. I feel like Bob Dylan does not have the virtuosity that a Steven Tyler has, but what he did with his harmonica was exactly what it should be. When he's doing a Tambourine Man, you're going to want, who's the guy from Blues Traveler?
John Popper.
Yeah, you don't want some like
no, you don't want him to rip
wall.
into it. You're like, no, slow down. Yeah. It's too much harmonica.
Exactly, you don't want that. So, but if we're going to base it on technical abilities or something, probably Steven Tyler would be up there. John Lennon, so if Bob Dylan is 5th, I would say John is 4th. I actually don't know how Tom Petty played. I know that live, whenever they would do Mary Jane's Last Dance, I think the like backup guitar player would play the harmonica. But I don't know who played it on the record.
Yeah, I thought he could, but with you, I don't know what he did. It's kind of like with Steven Tyler, too. I don't think of him or Robert Plant as harmonica players, and then you see old footage, you're like, oh, holy cow. They're not just starting. They really know how to play. They just don't always have room in a song to hit it.
Absolutely, yeah. So I would put, those are Steven Tyler, Robert Plant. There's some definite, like, sort of blues harmonica licks in there and stuff. This is going to sound terrible, but that's, like, actual harmonica playing, whereas Bob is just kind of just blowing on
he's just doing Bob Dylan stuff.
Yeah, but like I even have a friend of mine, we both love Bob Dylan, and we would do impressions of his harmonica playing, and we would just randomly blow in and out, just out of time, out of beat.
Yeah, rule.
Yeah, but it's like it is in service to the song, you know. There's nothing, you know, it's doing what it needs to do, and yeah. So that's a great question, though. I love harmonica. It was my first instrument. I learned to play in the style of, my grandpa was a harmonica player, and I'm a big folk music fan as well. You know, we're talking about Bob Dylan, and my grandpa was a very like hopping freight trains, sort of like, you can imagine like sort of a Woody Guthrie style guy. Like, and he played harmonica, and he said he could play over 1,000 songs on his harmonica. And harmonica has a deep place with me. But that's a great question. I love that question.
Did you see that there, again, going back to that trailer, I saw that there is a Woody Guthrie in the Bob Dylan, what's it? I forget the name of the movie now. Into the Unknown.
I can't remember what it was called.
Oh, Complete Unknown.
That.
Yeah, if you watch
Complete
the beginning,
Unknown?
I think it's Woody, or maybe he's talking. I think there's a quick little person being, I don't think it looked like Woody, but he was like, hey, there's a new kid we're talking about. He seems pretty cool. It's Bob Dylan. I was like, well, it's Woody.
Wow. Okay.
I think
okay.
now you got me second guessing.
You know what?
I have to watch it again.
It could be Pete Seeger. Do you know who Pete Seeger is?
I don't.
Pete Seeger was, if you think back of a lot of the earlier protest folk music, like if I had a hammer in the morning. He was a very, old timey kind of folk singer, and he was almost sort of like almost the patriarch of the sort of folk music scene. He was very much a leader. There's lots of videos of him online. You can see him speaking about the power and the majesty of Bob Dylan. And interestingly, when Bob went electric at the Newport Folk Festival, Pete Seeger was the one who pulled all the wires out to
shut it down, Bob. What are you doing?
To shut it down. Yeah.
I just looked it up real quick. It looks like Scoot McNairy plays Woody Guthrie in the upcoming drama film.
Okay.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah, me neither. Sounds like a folk singer name in itself, Scoot McNairy.
Edward Norton as Pete Seeger. I didn't know that.
Oh, cool. Edward Norton. Look at that. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. And Chalamet looks great. He's got the right jawline. And when he was singing, he was really doing all the inflections. I'm excited.
Let's jump ship a little bit. What are your thoughts on Oasis getting back together? Those shows sold out like instantly.
You have no idea. You don't know it, but right now I'm sitting next to an Oasis poster on my wall.
Nice.
I adore Oasis. Yeah, ever since I was a kid. I've seen them 4 times. I went to England a few years ago. I was doing a short tour over there, and I made some stops to Manchester to like go to the record store that they mention in Shaker Maker on the first record. I even like saw where they lived. I went to like where their neighborhood was.
Oh, I did that in Seattle. I went to every creepy. My wife's like, "What are we doing?" I'm like, "Oh, this is the spot where the guy did this." She's like, "This is weird." So if I was over there,
you did?
Yeah, I mean, if I was over in Europe, I'd do the same thing. You know, I'd.
Yeah.
But in Seattle, I did all the grunge things. I went to like, this is where this is the apartment that Lane Staley passed away, and here's the here's a store we used to buy cigarettes. It got creepy.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. I even went to the club in Glasgow where they got their record contract. Sort of a famous story how they went up there like last second with a band that was like they shared a rehearsal space with, and they weren't on the bill, but they were like, "Hey, we're here. Can we play?" And they were like, "No, you can't play." And then the other band was like, "Well, we'll play a shorter set so they can play." So they played, and then that was when they got their record deal. But yeah, it was such a small place, too. It's King Tut's Wawa Hut in Glasgow. But yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do ever is to like go track down significant musical spots, you know, like I've done it with Bob Dylan. I found the street that he's walking down in Freewheelin'. I found his apartment where he wrote so many of those great songs early on. Yeah, I love that stuff.
So were you pretty surprised Oasis was getting back together? I was because, you know, they're obviously the notoriety of the band, of the brothers. I was pretty shocked. I
was honestly too, because I have followed, you know, both of the Gallaghers. I liked a lot of Noel's early solo stuff. I think he's maybe fallen off a little bit. And then Liam, you know, tried. He had a band called BDI. He like tried to keep it alive, and now he's sort of singing a lot of the songs from the Oasis catalog, which is great. But they would always bicker and on social media and stuff, and it really seemed like they were never going to get back together. And part of me didn't want them to get back together.
I love the fighting. It's next level, the hatred. It's so over the top.
Have you heard of how there was a recording of an interview they did early in their career, probably like 94, where they were arguing with each other? It became so popular that it actually charted in England. And it wasn't even a song. It was a recording of them arguing with each other.
I love it.
But no, I did put my... I did enter the lottery to get tickets, but it did not happen.
Oh, yeah, I did that for the Zeppelin thing. It was a far cry.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of other random questions that I'm hoping you might be able to answer for me. First one, out of left field, what's your favorite episode of Seinfeld?
Oh, where are you? It's like you know my subconscious. Favorite episode.
And that's a big question. Or you could just say some of the ones that pop into.
It's such a big question.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want you to. Yeah, the best one ever.
Kenny Rogers Roasters.
Oh my God, that's the one I would say.
Okay, great.
Yeah, when they switch apartments, right? Isn't that when they end up switching?
Yeah.
He's like, hey, I was up talking
to things are creaking and cracking, and that red light's burning my brain.
Oh, I'm stressed.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Dude, absolutely. I like Jimmy. Jimmy's new in town.
Jimmy likes your moves.
The plyometric.
Yeah, the shoes.
The training shoes. Yeah. And then with the velvet fog, the benefit for the AM.
Oh, you're living by yourself. That's fantastic. I'm so proud of you.
Oh, you're not doing too bad yourself. Dude, yeah. Oh, my God. Let's talk about Seinfeld.
I know, right? How good is that?
Cool, man.
I like that one a lot. I like different scenes. I'm trying to think the scene where Jerry is he's got to steal the loaf of bread back. He's like, give it to me. Yeah. Give it to me, old bag.
Give me the ride, you old bag. Yeah. That's the episode with Rusty, the horse that Kramer is like watching and like the beefarino and like, oh, man. Yeah.
I do like that. When they first came back on Netflix, I rewatched them all, and they all were really good except the very last one. And the first couple,
oh my God,
the first couple are kind of like dry, like they didn't really find the clicking humor. And then
Exactly.
once it kicked off, though, I was like, these are all good. I couldn't rank them really. I like different scenes, but they're all so good.
I do agree. The last episode was kind of a shame. It was like, did you see, are you a Curb Your Enthusiasm fan?
I am. I lost my HBO or Max, whatever they were on. I don't have that anymore, so I watched it for a while, so I didn't get a chance to catch up on the last season.
Yeah, so you probably heard that the last episode of Curb was Larry and Jerry trying to make up for the last episode of Seinfeld, which was so bad.
No, I didn't know that.
So they kind of do there's kind of like a storyline in Curb that almost mirrors the Seinfeld actual storyline, like what was going on. And in that episode of the show on Curb, they get this idea about how to end it that's so much better than how we ended, the series back in the day. So so even they know that it was kind of a letdown.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
My other question is, I think I saw that you have a Gibson Les Paul Jr. TV Yellow.
Oh my God!
How does and that's with the P90s, right? How does that sound?
Yeah.
I've always wanted one, but I've never actually played one. So I'm in love with something I don't even know that I love. But will you confirm to me that is the
Aren't we all?
Yeah. But is that confirmed to me that that's the guitar I want? And also, what year is yours?
Well, mine is a newer one, so there's no amazing lineage there. But it is you're correct, it's a TV Yellow Les Paul Special. It's my first Gibson. I played a lot of Gibsons, but Gibson's, your guitar player, it sounds like, how they're shorter scale than like a Stratocaster.
Yeah. Like
a Les Paul's shorter scale. When I first picked it up and I was playing it, it felt short. The strings felt all like bendy and noodly, and the neck itself was like really thick. But just after a few days of playing with it, because I had come from playing a Strat, which is almost the exact opposite. It's got a really long neck. It's really skinny. So I don't know. I sat with this Les Paul Special for a while, and then it just clicked into me. The thing that's cool about the Special is it's made on a budget, right? So it's a budget guitar. That's what it was back in the day. The bridge, in order to save money, it's like a super, super simple bridge that just, it's a single piece of metal or whatever that just sort of sits on the guitar. And unlike, like a typical Les Paul that has what are they called? Two-nomatic bridge that has the saddles that you can slide back and forth. So with all those saddles and screws and springs, you sort of lose resonance, right? With the Special, with just one solid bar, it just sounds incredible. It's like you can hear. I remember trying to explain it to my girlfriend. You can hear the wood of the guitar almost. I don't know. It's hard to explain. The only drawback is that solid bridge, there are some intonation issues. So I did have to switch it out with there's someone who makes custom Les Paul Special bridges that are intonated. And I have to say it doesn't sound quite as good as the original bridge that came on it, but at least it can tune. But, oh my God, if you're thinking about it, go for it, dude. I love it.
I like finding guitars at pawn shops. I don't want to pay full price. Also, I want something that some dude played in smoky bars that went nowhere, and it's got 100 gallons of sweat and smoke.
Yeah.
I'll see it at a pawn shop. I'm like, oh my God, I want it. You could go buy a brand new one that's completely pristine, but I'm like, I don't want it. I want to feel A, like I'm getting a deal. B, like I uncovered something that they don't know that they have.
You know what? I'm totally with you. It was sort of only recently have I thought about buying used guitars, because I've been the opposite. I've been buying new guitars forever. The exact reason that you're saying I'd love to have a guitar that has a story. Seems like it has songs inside of it. You're sort of helping release the music that it has inside of it, as cheesy as that sounds. But then, you know what? I did sort of I tried to look at it from the other angle. And I have a guitar that I bought. I have a 2005-ish Martin OM35, which is a fantastic, it's an orchestra model, so it's got a little smaller body acoustic guitar. But I bought it brand new. And it was a guitar that I bought right when I was finishing college, and I knew I was going to move to New York City and be a folk singer and everything. And so I bought this guitar brand new at the time. And now, looking back, it's still the guitar that I take with me every day to when I'm teaching lessons. It's still the guitar that I've written all my albums on. And when I look at it, it's dinged up and it's got a little wear and tear, and I can almost remember every single dent, with a lot of the dents that are on the body. And I don't know, it's kind of like, well, you know what? I was looking for a guitar that had all these stories in it, but now my guitar that I bought brand new, now it has all those stories in it. I think there are merits to new guitars and old guitars.
Yeah, I think it's relatable to cars. I think if you buy your first car and it's all your money and it's the first one that you own or the first one you wanted, and then time goes by and you've had it for 30 years, you're like, hey, I'll keep care of this and it'll be kind of cool. But then also, I mean, I was kind of hoping that your Les Paul Jr. was like, yeah, 1957. I'd be like, oh my God, it's so old. Because there's something to that, like a Carina Flying V from the 60s. I'm like, oh my God, it's so old. How does it, where's it been? So I see both sides. I don't put down either, and I would buy either one.
Man, I was just looking at Flying Vs because I also do a Tom Petty tribute, and he had a Flying V in those earlier days.
Oh, it's so cool looking.
Yeah, I've been looking at them lately. I'm like, why do I need a Flying V? I do not need a Flying V.
I bought one. I totally fell for it, and mine was I'm a big metal fan, but then I got into like Tom Petty and then Albert King, and then I started realizing how long the Flying V has been around and how it started, and then it made me love it even more. Why did speed metal? Why did like Megadeth and Yngwie Malmsteen? Why did they get Flying Vs? It's a blues guitar, but then I got way into it. It's hard not to get addicted to it.
You know what's funny? Can you picture an Explorer, a Gibson Explorer?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think Grohl Grohl plays them a lot.
They came out at the same time, the Flying V and the Explorer, in 1958, I think, which is like way earlier than I thought either of those guitars
They seem like an 80s guitar. They look like an 80s.
Exactly, that's what I think. They look like metal guitars, especially the Explorer. But the Explorer came out at the same time as the Flying V in 1958, which is kind of mind-blowing.
What about the Thunderbird, then? That's probably the same era, then, I imagine, right? Because that's kind of funky.
I don't know. That's a great question. I do love the Thunderbird, too.
I do, too.
Which one? There's the Thunderbird. Aren't there, like, two that are, like, the opposite offset?
There is. Yeah, there's, like... Oh, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it is the Firebird. Maybe you're right.
Too many guitars.
How many? Can I ask how many do you have?
I think the count now is like 12, I guess. I don't know if a lot of them are much to write home about, but they're all significant to me, like guitars that I've accumulated throughout my life.
Is that the most you've had, or have you trimmed them down?
I cannot get rid of guitars, which is maybe a shortcoming, but I still have every guitar I've ever had. Even the guitars that I bought with paper route money when I was 14 years old, still have them.
It's Jon Fickes. He plays John Lennon with the Fab Four. We got off track there for a little while and hardly talk about the Beatles.
Dude, off track. We were on track the whole time.
But it's USA Meets the Beatles. The 60th anniversary is coming here to Idaho, the Egyptian Theater. Friday, October 25th. John, we can't wait to see you in town, and thanks for calling me today.
Oh, thank you, man. It was a great talk.